537. No, I was just looking at something, guys. But anyway, welcome. You know, one of the things about the fandom, the MLP, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fandom, the Bronies, the Pegasisters, the Rift Cafeers and Analysis, the one thing about them in any fandom, period, any fan base, is how much fun it is to speculate and theorize. And sometimes fans that are not renowned, and sometimes part of that fandom that's not as well known as established members, like let's say a Dr. Wolf or a Lightning Bliss, sometimes the unknown fans can come up with speculations and theories that one wouldn't even think about until they bring it up. One fan at one of the MLP Facebook group pages actually brought this theory up. You see, what they brought up was a speculating theory that I'm surprised Dr. Wolf didn't touch upon yet, and I'm sure he will. Because he recently did one where he kind of talked about, Discord wanting to be like Celestia towards Twilight with this whole pretending to be Grogar situation throughout, or ordeal, I should say, that he tried to pull off in the final season. But the point is, that's Dr. Wolf for you. He likes to kind of speculate and theorize, why certain things happen. Well, one fan brought up a scenario that I'm surprised Dr. Wolf didn't bring up, but again, I'm pretty sure he might talk about it, is Celestia and Luna's, and I am doing this uncut and on the fly, and unscripted, is Celestia and Luna's immortality. You see, one thing that Blank Reacts brought up in his reaction video to Last Problem is the fact that although we didn't see Celestia and Luna, it kind of opened the door to interpretation of whether or not Twilight herself would, remain alive and immortal, would stay alive and immortal for a long time like they did, but we don't see them. We don't see them in this final episode. So it leaves the door open to speculate whether or not perhaps their immortality is no more. And one fan by the name of Jonathan Frank, like I said, at one of the MLP forums brought up this as a good speculating theory. You see, we all know that when Celestia and Luna fused their crowns together into one crown and passed that rule and leadership of Equestria onto Twilight with that crown, and thus also passing down a bit of the power, if not all of the power, Jonathan speculated and brought up the fact that when they did this, did Celestia and Luna at the same time give up their immortality for mortality? In other words, did they stop being immortal beings and just become regular mortal alicorns? One has to wonder. Because if they're going to retire off at Silver Shores, one has to assume that by retiring off to Silver Shores, they realize that they have to give up their immortality and become mortal, just like the residents they will be around. So one has to wonder. And Jonathan Frank did a great job in bringing this up. One has to wonder is when they brought their crowns together, especially Celestia's, because she has that jewel in it, did they give up their immortality and give it and pass it on to Twilight and essentially her friends? And if they did so, does that mean, because you take a look at the ending of Last Problem, and you take a look at the fact that Twilight's student in the future, Luster Dawn, now has her own group of friends that she walks off with, does that mean from a possible continuity open to interpretation perspective, basically confirmed continuity open to interpretation perspective, does that mean Twilight down the line will do the same thing that Celestia and Luna did, and will Twilight and her friends pass their leadership and their rule over Equestria to Luster Dawn and her friends, and by doing so, will Twilight pass on not just her crown to Luster Dawn and her power, but also her immortality? One has to wonder that. Because again, We didn't see Celestia and Luna in the time skip. We didn't see them. We only saw Twilight. And again, like Blank Reacts pointed out in his reaction video of Last Problem, it actually opens that door to interpretate whether or not maybe, you know, an alicorn's immortality is based on their power or their rule. So one has to think that because Celestia and Luna, mostly Celestia for some time, but along with Luna, if you kind of put that whole banishing Luna as Nightmare Moon to the moon, if you put that on the side, collectively along with Luna, for thousands of years, ruled over Equestria. Now, was that due to the fact that they were both immortal, due to the fact that, well, the crowns gave them that power? They allowed that to happen. No one really knows. I mean, we do know that in flashbacks to when Granny Smith was young, and other characters were young, that Celestia and Luna, mostly Celestia, was just as she is now, just as we last saw her, with the crown and everything. So one has to think, did that crown, along with Luna's, give her and her sister immortality for thousands of years? One has to speculate and wonder that. And it's a good theory that Jonathan Frank brought up. It really is. It really, really is. But again, one has to think and theorize and speculate that when they gave their power to Twilight, they also gave up their immortality and became mortal. Thus, the reason being, as sad as it is to say, that we didn't see them in the future time skip. We didn't see them in that future timeline. That perhaps because they give up the immortality and became mortal, once they fused the crowns together into the crown that Twilight has now, and gave her their power in a sense, that by becoming mortal, they essentially were now allowed to finally, live out live out the rest of their lives as normal mortal ponies, with the exception that they're alicorns. One has to think that. One has to think that. But we don't know. We don't know whether or not that's true. But if you take a look, but again, the reason it's brought up, and the reason I'm saying this again, when you take a look at the fact that the way the last problem ended, with Twilight's student going off with her new friends, and thus in a confirmed continuity situation that is open to interpretation, fan interpretation, Twilight essentially could end up passing down her power and her rule along with her friends to Luster Dawn, her student, and her new friends, just like it was passed down to her and her friends by Celestia and Luna. So one has to wonder that. One has to wonder what I'm trying to say, that when Twilight became ruler, the crowns were fused, that not only did Celestia and Luna give up their immortality and become mortal, but they passed that immortality on down to Twilight and her friends ends as well. That includes Spike, who's a friendship ambassador, as well as a co-ruler along with the rest of the main seven. One has to wonder. One has to think that. And again, it's one of those situations to where the ending to Last Problem is kind of a confirmation, is a continuity confirmation that's open to interpretation. Even though the show, sadly, is animation-wise is done, the story, the continuity confirmation is open to fan interpretation. And this is one of those speculating theories that's open to fan interpretation, and whether or not, Twilight, is now immortal, or it's gained immortality, I should say, thanks to Celestia and Luna fusing their crowns together and giving it to her, and thus giving up their immortality for mortality. And thus, not only giving her that immortality, and like I said, giving up their mortality, but it also gives her friends, in a sense, because of their strong connection and closeness, immortality as well. One has to think that. One has to speculate and think that. But what do you guys think? Do you think Jonathan Frank over at one of the MLP forums, or one of the MLP message group pages at Facebook, I should say, do you think he has a point? Do you think when Celestia and Luna fused their crowns together, that the jewel that was in Celestia's crown that fused and helped become part of that crown that now Twilight has, did that allow them in the process to give up their immortality for mortality, and thus pass it on to Twilight and her friends until Twilight and her friends do the same thing with maybe Luster Dawn and her friends? What do you think? Do you think that's possible? Do you think from a confirmation, continuity, open to interpretation perspective, do you think that's, the direction they could end up they would end up going? Let me know down below. Comment if you like. I'd like to thank Jonathan Frank and any other fans that thought about this and speculated on it. But what do you guys think about it? I'd love to hear what each and every one of you have to say, and I will talk to y'all later.